Hillsborough County Commissioner, our good friend, the Hitman, Ken Hagan, joining us from his hotel room. What's up, Hitman? How are you?
Hey Jay, how you doing, brother? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound great, man. Thank you so much for making some time today. You and I don't know if we've mentioned this when I was with DAE. I think we might have, but you and I go back even before my radio days because I met you through my buddy Jay Evans, who you played ball with growing up, and we were recognized by the Hillsborough County Commissioners. We won the 2011 Pony World Series out of North Tampa, and we were up in front of the county commissioners, and that's how we initially met back in the day. So that was 13 years ago. That was before I even thought about getting into radio. So it's kind of funny how our paths have kind of intertwined over the years. But Ken, I always appreciate your perspective on this entire thing because you are a county commissioner, but you're a baseball guy. Like you and I have talked baseball for so many years, and it's just so. Well, before we get into the minutia of this entire thing, is it weird that we're at this spot? I talked to some West Tampa guys. I feel like baseball was born in West Tampa, here in the Tampa area, and they're just so sick of this entire thing that we're not talking about our Tampa lifers going to games and the times that we're talking about things like this, and it's kind of sad that this is the point that we're at, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and like you, baseball's in my blood. Grew up playing since the age of 6, I believe, through high school and college, and was a Rays season ticket holder for the first 5 years before I was elected to office. And then the wife said I had to give up the season tickets at that time, along with some other season tickets, except for my Gator season tickets.
There you go.
I'll say, but like you, it's in my blood, and it's just so frustrating to having gone through this for about 14 years now, championing the team, should be in Tampa and Hillsborough County. And it shouldn't take this long. And I say that, I have personally visited every single major league ballpark but one, except Arizona. Again, just a huge baseball fan. I've spoken to many CEOs and baseball folks in different administrations or in different teams. And I can tell you specifically one with the Braves. I sat down with their CEO. It's been several years ago now, but they brokered their deal, the new ballpark and the battery which surrounds it, in 2 months, and then 2.5 years, opening day. So it doesn't need to take this long, and that's what such a frustrating thing about this whole thing. Not only as an elected official who's been championing the team to come to Tampa, but just as a baseball fan, we should have this settled a decade ago. And unfortunately, it hasn't been, but I think we're getting real close. So,
I had Chris Latval on last week, Pinellas County, and it was a good conversation, man. And he's one of those guys that he was staunch against the deal. And you know me, I always want to hear every viewpoint, right? It's easy for me to be as a baseball guy, like, yeah, just get it here, screw you if you don't agree. But I want to hear what's your reservations? Why do you not approve of this? And he gave me some information, and it's hard to he's speaking for his constituents, right? And it's hard to argue with that aspect of it. But the one thing that stood out to me, Ken, was that he said it pretty clear as day. I trust Matt, I trust Brian, I trust Ken Welch, even though we don't agree with everything, St. Pete City, the mayor, but he's got that reservation about Stu. And it's so easy because anytime something goes wrong with the Rays, everybody always wants to blame Stu. It's the low-hanging fruit. But I think it speaks volumes when you have a county commissioner just really come out and say that, because usually it's a little closer to the vest. You want to be a little bit more diplomatic and but to be so transparent about that, I feel like more and more people politically now are coming out and not trusting the Rays and Stu Sternberg, and it gets. How does something like this going to get done if there's no trust? There's got to be trust between your partners, no?
Well, that's paramount. And again, I'm not going to speak for Commissioner Latvala, right, other than to say I understand, again, from an elected official's perspective, your number one goal and priority should be to protect the taxpayers and not to get in a situation that it's going to be on the backs of taxpayers. And unfortunately, we all experienced 2 unforeseen hurricanes, and St. Pete and Pinellas County, they were crushed, and they've got a lot of needs, a lot of priorities. So I don't question anyone's motivation or their reason for doing it. I certainly don't blame the St. Pete City Council or the Pinellas County Commission for wanting to simply delay for a couple of weeks. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. Uh,
Mhm.
and to be honest with you, this issue really shouldn't have come up during campaign season or during an election season. Let me start with that, because any major issue, there's so many unknowns. There's so many. Again, you're in the midst of a campaign. People want to say one thing, use it against you. An issue of this magnitude really should have been um, completed or finalized early in the spring, maybe summer at the latest, because ultimately what happens is you think you're at the finish line, you have an election, and then you have two new commissioners that are suddenly elected, and their very first meeting out of the box, you're asking them to vote on over $300 million bond issue. So I don't blame anybody for saying, "Hey, let's take a little bit more time in doing that." So I don't think we should criticize them for that. I think that's perfectly reasonable and should take place. But with respect to Stu, I've always said I get along great with Stu, with Brian All, with Matt Silverman. They've been, very kind to me. I'd like to think I have got a very good relationship with them.
Right.
I don't always agree with their moves, such as, the split season aspect. And I told them to their face from the very beginning, I oppose it. This is a bad idea. But I like them. I respect them. However, I will say, having dealt with and negotiated with Jeff Vinnick and the Lightning, with the Glaziers and the Buccaneers, I will just say it's challenging at times. I'm
Yeah.
not going to say a trust issue or anything like that, because I haven't experienced that. I'll just say it can be extremely challenging. So, from that perspective, I can understand where Commissioner Lotvala may be coming from. I have not spoken to him, but it's not always the easiest to work with. And again, just the sheer fact that it's taken this long to ultimately get to an agreement, I would think suggests that, at times, at least initially, I will say, going back to the early years, the position of the team was the political leaders and the business leaders need to work things out. Well, up until a couple of years ago, the team never really had that sense of urgency to get a deal done. Now they do. And I recognize that. I think most folks should recognize that. But that wasn't the case. And I would suggest that most organizations, most communities, when they get to that point, everyone gets together and they all share that sense of urgency and works together. And for the longest time, it was just a challenge. So again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to suggest a trust issue.
No, yeah, yeah.
I would say it's just it's challenging at times.
Yeah, and listen, I have a great relationship with those guys too. I mean, I've interviewed Stu on multiple occasions, and he's always been great to me. And again, may not always agree with the way he goes about certain things, but I've, it is what it is, right? Like he's got business. I may not agree with his decisions, but he's a businessman. He's he's making a whole heck of a lot more money than I am, so he's made a lot of right decisions in that aspect. So it's just tough to be in this situation where we're at right now, where the Rays send, this letter out before the meeting last week. And now we're getting, I don't know I know you were driving. Did you get wind of the letter that was sent from the Pinellas County Board of Commissioners, Kathleen Peters?
I skimmed it. I haven't
Okay.
really had a chance to read it in depth and to digest it, but I did skim it. And
The big thing was just, I think, at the end, where the Rays must either indicate in writing that they intend to move forward under the agreement as executed, or provide a clear notice of termination pursuant to the certain section of the agreement no later than December 1st. So they want an answer by December 1st on what the next step is in this entire process. Do you think we're going to get that? Because the Rays are got to be looking at this situation, and I get it. I mean, it's a business move. If the stadium is there, they don't want to get rid of in writing that they have that land around the stadium, right? That's a huge coup for them. Whether it was the right move, the wrong move, whether people think that's shady or not, like it's a business move. And the fact that if they terminate the deal, that comes out of it, and then the people that may have some reservations may not put that in the deal, that's tough, because that's a huge part of the agreement that I'm sure the Rays ownership were like hanging their hat on, because if they do sell, right, at some point, they get to keep that land. Lavala said in the beginning that was one of the things that kind of pushed them off of the deal, but enough people didn't have any issue with it. But now, because of how everything's going, people do have some kind of concern of like, wait a second then. And that's what more time does. More people kind of look through these things with fine tooth combs. But do you think a deal will be done by December 1st? Because It's kind of tough, man. It's November 25th. It's getting late early.
Absolutely. And first of all, that's not only extremely relevant, but I think extremely critical point that you just made. And again, I want to, 100% transparency. I have not read their agreement or
Right.
the understanding of their deal. So I want to say that.
Mhm.
But just from an outside looking in, it somewhat appeared that there was a game of chicken being played on who was going to blink first, because as you suggested, should the Rays do that, then I guess they give up their development rights or their land rights that they have there. And it appears, again, from outside looking in, that this is ultimately going to be litigated, because I can't see it being finalized by December 1. But unless, again, if you read the one article that was written last week, I guess when Brian On was in front of
Mhm.
I believe it was CP City Council,
City council, yeah.
he referenced two different times settlement. He used that term settlement. And so it sounds like they do not want to trigger whatever would occur by terminating the deal. However, they would like to sit down and reach an agreement on, I guess, the revenue that's going to be lost as a result of playing at Steinbrenner Field, and what has to happen there. So, again, from an outside looking in, that appears to be um, their course of action. So,
Right.
um, I wouldn't be surprised if it's ultimately litigated in some fashion.
So if it does get litigated like that, does that mean that the deal is done? Like you're saying all, because every time you hear, as much as we try to read into it, I didn't go to law school, you know what I mean? But I try to do and try to read it as much as I can, try to follow along, bring on experts, try to answer a lot of the questions. But Ken, you know as well as I do, the majority of the people out there, they're seeing this on the surface, right? They're hearing things like the deal is done and litigation and things like that, and it's scaring people that the baseball team will not be here. So and that's crazy to think, right? Because you and I know, and people say, oh, the attendance isn't there, and we can go back and forth, and you and I both agree that it would be a much different, or at least somewhat different, on the Tampa side. But we know, man, there's tens of thousands of baseball players, kids growing up that are placed. Look at Major League Baseball. You see Pete Alonso and Kyle Tucker that play right down the block from our house. Like, this isn't a place where baseball goes to die. But unfortunately, our Major League team is just, it's on life support right now. How do you see? Do you see a stadium being built on that side? And if you don't, what is the next step? Do you think? Is it relocation? Do we look back in Tampa on the Hillsborough side? Like, where do we go after the litigation aspect?
Well, a couple things. My gut and instincts tell me that the stadium deal or ballpark deal is done. While it's not official, that's my gut. And at this point, the only thing that's yet to be determined is the development project itself. And does that move forward? How does that move forward without a ballpark? I know that the ballpark was a part of the original RFP that went out. So, can you move forward with the current development team? Does that
Mm-hmm.
trigger a new RFP going out to again start from scratch and go from there? A lot of unknowns. My gut, my instincts say that the deal that was agreed to and approved by both bodies earlier this year, that deal as is done. Now, does that mean that they cannot sit down and renegotiate another deal? Absolutely not. I think from all parties, or at least from the team side and from Tampa and Hillsborough side, our primary focus today is ensuring a smooth and seamless transition for 2025 at Steinbrenner Field,
Right.
and recognizing that the team is going to experience significant financial losses this year, and and candidly, we're sensitive to that.
Mm-hmm.
And the team ultimately chose Steinbrenner not because it was in Tampa. It's because the capacity is the highest of any of the surrounding minor league ballparks, and it's the most MLB ready. So it will require very little, if any, infrastructure as far as not only access, but um, the clubhouses and things of that nature. There was even a Rays player a week or so ago. I can't remember who it was that came out and said, "Yeah, that ballpark is fine the way it is for it's Major League Baseball ready." And so that's why they chose that, because it will provide them the greatest opportunity to maximize their already limited revenues that they're going to generate this year. So that's why that decision was made. And that's all we're focused on. And I have to say and give props to the New York Yankees, Al Steinbrenner and Tony Bruno and their folks, because while Hillsborough County owned Steinbrenner Field, at the end of the day, it was the Yankees' call. Mm-hmm. And they said, they want to do what's best for Major League Baseball. And we're working closely with the Yankees, with the Rays, with MLB, again, to make that as smooth and seamless transition as possible. So that's our number one goal right now. But moving forward, I think at some point, and again, I'm personally being respectful of this process, have not spoken to the Rays, have not reached out, don't plan on doing so anytime soon. We're going to watch and see. And if or when it's officially terminated, then we're going to be ready on our side to have that conversation. Now, I don't know if that's going to be tomorrow, 6 months from now, or a year from now, but we're going to be ready to have that. I guess the one side of the fact that there's now going to be a delay, in some ways, I guess it provides a little bit of additional time to have the conversation, because the longer we wait now, you're inevitably, in all likelihood, going to have to wait till 2029 to have a ballpark wherever ultimately the site's chosen. But I feel very strongly, regardless of if it remains on the Pinellas side or Hillsborough side, that baseball is going to remain in Tampa Bay. I know from Major League Baseball's perspective, from Commissioner Manfred himself, who has personally told me on a couple of occasions that Tampa Bay is an extremely important market for MLB. And I believe you saw Commissioner Manfred issue a statement last week to that extent, essentially saying that things are going to work out in Tampa Bay. So can't tell you which side of the bay it'll ultimately end up in, but I'm still confident that baseball will remain here.
Ken, before I let you go, I know a lot of people have been asking me recently of a new stadium possibly for the Buccaneers at Raymond James, and if that would be independent of a new baseball stadium, would that preclude Hillsborough from jumping in if it opens up? Would that preclude knowing that maybe a new Raymond James or a new football stadium, would that prevent possibly Hillsborough getting in on a baseball side, or is that kind of independent of itself? And also, is there any kind of discussions about the Rays getting a new stadium? Because we just look at some of these palaces at the NFL games, it's pretty crazy, man. And Recher has gotten better over the years for sure.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, extremely valid point, and one that we cannot ignore, because again, I sit on the TSA, Tampa Sports Authority, work closely with Brian Ford and the Buccaneers. But at the same time, I've stated for the last several years, there's not going to be a new stadium anytime soon. However, there will be significant renovations that occur moving forward. Their lease agreement is up here very soon, and we've yet to have any conversations with the team, but we know that those are, imminent, that we will sit down and begin to have those conversations. We do know, while we do not know what their expectations are, we do know that it's in our interest to continue to maintain a state-of-the-art, technologically superior stadium if we want to continue to have Super Bowls, college football playoff, and these other major events. We do know that. And what a lot of folks don't recognize is the fact that, all the concerts that we have. I tell people, my friends of mine that aren't baseball fans or Buccaneer fans, I said, take the Bucs out of it. If you want the Beyoncé, the Taylor Swifts, the Kenny Chesneys, and the Savannah Bananas coming up, and all these other major events, it's in their contracts. They must play, or they will only play, NFL ready and state-of-the-art stadium. So if we want to continue having all these world-class acts, that we have to continue to upgrade our facilities. Now, of course, with that, we get long-term agreement for the team to remain here. We improve revenue sharing for us. We ensure, like the last renovation agreement, that the team has significant skin in the game. The Buccaneers put well over $100 million into the last renovation. They assumed all cost overrides. We improved our revenue sharing agreement with them. So it'll be a true public-private partnership. And and we can anticipate or suggest certain things that they might want to do. But as right now, we have not had those conversations.
Right.
But I've made it very clear we're not going to build a new football stadium anytime soon. At some point down the road, yes, but we're looking decades down the road, because I will tell you, the Sports Authority every year gets ranked in the top, not Sports Authority, but Raymond James, the top 5 stadiums, even competing against the Jerry's World and Allegiant in Las Vegas, SoFi in LA. It's still ranked very high, even though it's certainly not to that caliber when you go into these facilities that cost $2 billion, $5 billion, but it's still a very nice stadium. But we do know we're going to have to make improvements. That does make it, or will make it, somewhat challenging in order, if we should ultimately end up, building a ballpark for the Rays in Tampa. And that's why we have to be extremely creative when we do that, as we were with the agreement that we had put together, or the financial option that we had put together last year, that relied primarily on user fees, entertainment districts, creating a CDD, tourist tax dollars, things like that. But no, it's a very valid point that there's a limited amount of tourist tax dollars out there, which is the primary source that we use for Steinbrenner, Ray J, Amalie Arena. And I always have to point out, because the haters out there, scream or don't understand, that these are taxes that are for the most part paid by tourists that have very limited uses. They cannot go for fire rescue or to build schools or for law enforcement. They have to go for stadiums, infrastructure, and or to market or advertise tourism-related activities. So it's a proper source, paid almost exclusively by tourists. They're not general revenue dollars, but it's a limited source. And candidly, that's one of the reasons why I believe the Rays chose Pinellas last year, because their tourist tax dollars are a lot higher than Hillsborough's because of the beaches and everything. And we understand that. We recognize that, even though they also recognize and acknowledge that they would earn $30 to $50 million more a year in Tampa. But so we have a limited, I guess, long answer to, we have limited tourist tax dollars to use toward ballparks or stadiums. And so we haven't ignored the fact that we're going to have Ray J improvements. We're going to have Amalie Arena improvements moving forward over the next few years. And so that forces us to be extremely creative with any potential Rays ballpark discussion.
Great stuff, as always. The Hitman, Ken Hagan, Hillsborough County Commissioner. Ken, always appreciate your time. Always great catching up with you, my man. Have a great Thanksgiving with you and the family, buddy, and we'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Anytime. Always great chatting with you, and anytime you want me to come on, happy to do it.
Thanks buddy. You got it.